Good evening, our Patriot family, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Patriotism, where we deep dive into the Constitution and learn to understand how it helps us fight for our freedoms again. I'm your producer, host, and brother ▲ and with me is your brother Angry Conservative. On tonight's episode, we will be discussing the Declaration of Independence and how it shaped America to break away from Britain and become recognizable as a new nation capable of independence. I'll start off with a prayer, play my introduction, and then check on how my brother is. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to come to you to ask for a layer of protection for this podcast so it can stay up for people to understand what we have in order to fix this beautiful country. I love you, my Lord. Amen.
We need you now. We need you now. One day, one day, one day, I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on because of you. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
How are you doing today, brother?
I am doing wonderful. I'm always, any day above ground is a good day in my opinion. I don't know about everyone down in the chat or you, Zach, but I know any day above ground is a good day. And I hope everyone down in the chat is having a wonderful day. And please, like I said, please share this with friends and family, because the Declaration of Independence is the shortest document in our founding documents, but it is one of the most important documents we actually have, because it does tell us what we can do when our government gets too big for its britches, as they would say.
It was made on July 4th, 1776.
Zach, I am gonna disagree with that statement. The document, the Declaration of Independence, was actually was done on July 2nd, 1776, but was not passed in the Continental Congress until July 4th, 1776. There's a little bit of history with that document. Rich, I love that song.
Okay, let's take a look at the Declaration of Independence, widely considered one of America's most famous documents, and its name says it all. This is going to be where the 13 colonies formally declare their independence from England. And so before we dive into the document, let's kind of take a step back and look at what was going on. For the past year, prior to the writing of the Declaration of Independence, the colonies had been in open revolt against England, and we'd seen some epic battles of the Minutemen fighting at Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts, and then George Washington had been given control of the Continental Army. He was up in New York, New Jersey area. And then writing-wise, we all had a really powerful document the past year by Thomas Paine. He wrote Common Sense, where he makes this argument for individual liberties, no king should be ruling people, and that gets a lot of traction in the colonies as well. And so where did this all go down? It all happens in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the summer of 1776 at a kind of convention, if you will, called the Second Continental Congress. And we had representatives from all 13 colonies were there. And the key kind of idea about this is they kind of come to a realization that reconciliation with England, it's not going to happen. And so they need to make it official and let them know, you know what, we're going to become independent, break away from you guys. And a few guys are tasked with writing this document, the key players being John Adams, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson pretty much single-handedly writes the first draft. And after a month of writing and some edits by Franklin and Adams, it's presented to the Continental Congress on July 1st. There's a few kind of minor debates, and on July 2nd, it's unanimously passed. And John Adams, this is kind of a side note, John Adams thinks this is going to be our special holiday in the United States, the birth of our nation. It ends up actually being July 4th, the important day, because all the wording is finally approved on July 4th, and it was sent off to the printers then, and so we mark 4th of July as our Independence Day celebration. And so it's also important kind of to understand the background of this document, some of the wording. And one key thing to understand is that Europe is right in the middle of the Enlightenment, and this is the age of reason, it's the age of science, and really a lot of popular philosophers of the day espouse this idea of individual liberty. And Thomas Jefferson adopts these ideas and incorporates them into the Declaration of Independence. And it can really be broken into 4 sections. And the first section of the Declaration of Independence is the introduction. And here's where Thomas Jefferson states, when is a revolution justified? And he has that great kind of opening sentence where he says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another. Here he's stating, this is why we're justified to break away from you, England. Then he goes into the preamble, which is kind of an extension of the introduction. He says, this is what is expected of a government. And it's got this, well, probably one of the most famous lines in American history. It's been alluded to by politicians, civil rights leaders. We still talk about it today. And he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that you're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this is what a government should be providing the people. England, you're not doing this, he states. And we get from that into the indictment, which is really just a long, long list of bullet points, essentially, of what England is doing that is wrong, such as taxes, such as imposing their troops on the colonies. And then he wraps it up with the conclusion where he officially states that they're declaring their independence and uses the term United States of America to refer to the country. Now, who signed it? We had 56 people who ended up signing it. Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. Really the most famous, though, was John Hancock, who's actually, he was the presiding president of the Second Continental Congress. He's a merchant from Boston. And he signs it in a very grandiose way and says, so, you know, I'm going to sign it this way so the king will be able to read it without his glasses. Whether he really says this or not, it's something that's always been kind of attributed to him. It should also be noted, all the signers, they're all white males, and none of them are elected, actually. They're all kind of self-appointed from their colonies. Now, let's look at some of the fallout of this Declaration of Independence. The key concept being no more reconciliation. They're all in. The colonies are now in this to get independence, not to reconcile with England. And this is important because they're really kind of the first country to revolt against a colonial master. It really hadn't been done in the world at this point. It should also be noted, hey, these signers, they're kind of brave for what they did. This war is far from over. It's actually not going to end for another 7 years. And the United States or the colonies at the time had no major allies. These would be the guys who would be hanging for treason if this war was not successful. And finally, this declaration really upset England. Prior to this, the revolt had just been a minor nuisance to them. Now, the Revolutionary War was officially on.
Zach, if you actually want to show the document of the Declaration, it is actually, there's a link inside the private chat, and I will put it down into the main chat. But I also have the Declaration on my website if you want to download it, so you guys will have it. Zach, what do you think of the Declaration? But yeah, that is one of the most important documents we have in this country. And that is from the National Archives. So I think the Declaration would be one of those things that we need to know. But yeah, the Declaration of Independence, because I do have it pulled up here.
I think it's an amazing document because it let us basically succeed from Britain.
Do you think? And I'm not ask you this because I'm going in my teacher mode for a moment. Do you think if they didn't write the Declaration, we would still be under British rule? Would we be Canada right now? What do you think there in the chat? Do you think would we be like Canada and still under the rule of the crown if the document we're talking about, the Declaration of Independence, was not signed and given to the king? Hey, Zach. Scotty pretty much says it perfectly. Oh, for crying out loud. That's priceless. That one is priceless.
I would think so because we would be led by the Queen if we didn't.
Very true. That's Willie D. That's probably very true too. We might actually be speaking German right now, so that could be. And this is, as you can tell from the top, it is from the National Archives. And this is what it actually says. in Congress July 4th, 1776, which the Revolutionary War was already going on. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. That's, at the time we had 13. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Does anyone actually know how many grievances are actually in the Declaration of Independence to King George III? Does anyone actually, Zach, do you know? Do you actually know how many grievances are in this document right here?
I don't.
Does anyone in chat know how many grievances there are? Because I will give you another one about what it says and stuff. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments entrusted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that wherever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organize its powers in which form as to them shall most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Pursuance indeed will dictate what governments long established should be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experiences. So think about what I'm not going to say this right now. With what I'm reading, does it tell us what we can do? Does this document But does this give us a roadmap to what we can do as an American? Zach? Oh, Scotty. I'm surprised no one in the actual chat actually knows how many grievances are actually in this document. There are actually 27 grievances in the document, or complaints. And if that actually goes down, you'll see all 27 the way they're written. Where it says he has refused, them are all the grievances or causes of why they wanted their independence. There are 27 of them. But that's the thing about it. This document is, it's not a part of the Constitution, but it is part of the Constitution, if you can understand what I'm saying with that. Because if it wasn't for this document, the Constitution wouldn't have the power that it has. Because that... Scotty, this was one of my favorite learning about history, especially American history, because I love learning from the past. For crying out loud. A lot of the best stuff that was ever written was written in the past. But Zach, go ahead and put us up for a moment. Because that document, giving all the reasons that they wanted independence from Great Britain. How many... weren't grievances to overcome colonial self-rule? Yeah. To some extent, Chrissy, they were. Paul Revere. But yeah, that was... American hit. Hey, they say if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. So, is that why we're going through the crap that we're going through right now? People didn't learn their history? That's a whole nother story.
Angry. Yes, it does give us a leeway to help us get out of the turmoil we are in right now, in my honest opinion.
It does, because they had 27. They had 27 reasons why they wanted to leave Great Britain. How many do you think us, as Americans, have against our political establishment? I think it would be more than 27. That's just my... I honestly think that... But people do not want to actually know what the Constitution, what the Declaration of Independence, what a lot of these founding documents say, because how do I say this nicely without upsetting people? I'm trying to think of a way politically I can say this without making people upset. People don't want to put in the damn work to find out what these documents actually mean. And Jerry Lee, yes, it does. It does repeat. History's repeating itself. But I honestly think that people need to read that document, because it does give us a basis to do what we need to do. And Grumpy, you're right. He's right about that statement. People need to do that deep dive. And Zach, maybe we can do a little bit of that somewhere down the road, because that would be a very good topic for the Constitution, because it does tie into what the Constitution says. But I also gave you I think I gave you another video, didn't I? You want to show that one?
I actually have 2 more videos to show.
All right, let's do this, bud. Hey, Cindy. I hope you're having a wonderful day.
Seibert, and I want to welcome you to the short web seminar on the Declaration of Independence, 9 key concepts everyone should know. And if you're an international listener, we invite you to listen in as we take a look at this important United States founding document. 90% of today's Americans have never heard what you're about to hear. But in 1776, 90% of Americans had a basic understanding of what you're about to hear. Thomas Jefferson said this: the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And so we hope that this process of looking at the Declaration in more detail will spur us on to a new revolution of freedom as we understand this founding document. The 9 key concepts can be broken down into 3 more broad categories. The first is understanding the basic structure of the Declaration. Second of all, understanding the 7 component parts within that basic structure. And then thirdly, understanding that the Declaration and U.S. Constitution are designed to work together. So let's first take a look at understanding the basic structure. The total length of the Declaration of Independence is just under 1,400 words. About 400 words spell out the essence of the principles and beliefs upon which the United States was founded. These 400 key words are split about equally between the opening and the closing of the document. The other 1,000 words appear in the middle of the Declaration and outline over 25 abuses of King George III over a 10-year period. And so you can see the significance of the weight of the introductory words, the closing words, where some key concepts are outlined, and then these middle words, which there are 1,000 of them, really outline the abuses of King George III. So that's all that's involved in understanding key concept number 1, is that there's these 3 broader categories that the Declaration breaks down into. Now let's take a look at the 7 component part. Now, as we look at the detail of these 7 parts, we find that 4 of them are included in the introductory remarks. The first is the reason for the Declaration, and this is stated in the opening sentence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. And so this is the introductory remarks for why the Declaration is being written. The second thing that's in that introductory remarks, in that general category, are the self-evident truths that many people are familiar with. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And in our modern age, we confuse happiness with hedonism, and that is not what the founders of this document had in mind. Their perspective of happiness in 1776 would have meant this: that the individual would have the freedom to use their time, talent, and resources to pursue the directions in life that they believe would bring them the most satisfaction and would benefit their family, friends, fellow man, and future generations the most. What's also interesting about this introductory paragraph is this. In this short paragraph, the founders also describe the purpose of government, and they say this, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And so in this short sentence, they're basically saying the reason for government's existence is to secure those rights. And then lastly, in this introductory paragraph, they give reasons for altering or abolishing a form of government. And they say this, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, that is, preserving the self-evident truths that they had already named, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And so in this first paragraph, the most important thing of the four we've just looked at are these self-evident truths, that we're created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights, and those rights among many would be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are four huge concepts in this first couple of sentences. The reason for the declaration, the self-evident truths, the purpose of government, and the abolishment of government, and the reasons for it. Now, as I said before, the middle section, which is the biggest section, is the list of grievances against King George, and there are over 1,000 words in this section. There were over 25 abuses that King George III had done over a 10-year period, and in the declaration, the colonists made a list and suggested that that list was ample evidence that the declaration was justified, and here are just a few of them. Unfair taxation, cutting off trade, abolishing good and helpful laws, making arbitrary laws himself, creating new government departments with officials that harass the people, depriving colonists of trial by jury, protecting his own officials that were murderers.
Hey, Zach, stop it for a minute.
Rule, hiring mercenaries to harass and kill colonists, capturing and forcing colonists.
Anyone in chat want to say? Anyone in chat? Does any of that sound? Zach, tell me something. Does any of that sound familiar? What the heck's going on in the chat right now? Oh, for crying out loud. Hello to our new people and that is funny. Hey, Zach, I timed that one perfectly and told him to take that off for a moment. Oh, for crying out loud. Oh, for crying out loud. That was funny. That was funny. That was good. I have to give you guys that one. That was pretty good. I look up. Oh.
Love Rig. Thank you, CBC. I appreciate it.
But hey, Zach, and I just looked up and seen the chat going like that. I was like, That was just perfect timing when I said to stop the video. Oh, that was funny. That was good. But yeah. Meet the meat hammer. But Zach, any of this sound familiar? Out of the 10 that's listed right now, I say about half of them is going on right now with this government.
It sounds like our government.
It does. It truly does. But that was funny. I have to admit that was pretty good. Thank you. But let's get back to that video because we do have some grievances that we need to listen, and it does explain a lot of the concepts.
Fight against their fellow colonists or be killed, fostering domestic uprising in the colonies, and disallowing or not hearing any appeals for justice. And so those 25 abuses kind of fall into these general 12 categories, and they're listed there in this middle section. So the list of grievances is shown there. Now we move to the final section where the declaration is actually stated, and this is the statement. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the restitute of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. That's the declaration statement. After that statement, the rights of these united sovereign states are listed, and they include, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, and establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. Now notice here that they title the state of Great Britain as what they're dissolving from, and then they declare that the free and independent states of the United States have the rights and privileges of states. And so the colonists did not view them dissolving 13 colonies into one national government, but they viewed each of the states as sovereign states on the order of Great Britain, France, and other global states that existed at that time. And so it was literally the United States of America that they were doing, the United Sovereign States that they were making a declaration for. The seventh and last part in the last sentence is what I call the pledges. And this is where they make a pledge to God, and they say this, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, so a pledge to God and seeking his protection, and then a pledge to each other. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So in July and August of 1776, the signing of the Declaration took place. July 4th, John Hancock signed it. A printed copy was drawn up. It was announced to the people, And on August 2nd, the rest of the 56 signers signed the Declaration of Independence to make it official. You can have a better understanding of the Declaration of Independence. You now know more than 90% of Americans do about this document by simply reading the first 200 words and the last 200 words. Challenge others to do the same. Don't settle for bland or manipulated history. And then the last concept falls into the third and final category, and that is to understand that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution work together. And you need to take advantage of watching the short web seminar on that concept, that these two documents are designed to be interpreted together and can only fully be understood when it's done. As we conclude, there's some additional resources you may want to take advantage of after watching the YouTube videos on this playlist. For more freedom videos, check out July 4th Freedom.
What do you think, Zach? Do the Declaration and the Constitution go together hand in hand? And that's why when we talked last night about what we wanted to do, I knew this document is an important one with the Constitution. But yeah, the Declaration is a very important document in the
See, that's why we need to study this, because we are seeing the same things that they were experiencing.
Amen, brother. Amen. Because history has a funny way of repeating itself. Now we can get on to your video, but I will, with the two videos that we have done, I will share them out. I will give everybody the links for them videos if they want to go back and rewatch them. I will put them in the chat. So if you want to do yours, go ahead. But I will put the two that already done.
Good day to you. I am Thomas Jefferson. If I had but 10 seconds to tell you about myself, I would tell you these three things and not a word more. I was the author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and the father of the University of Virginia. Fortunately, we have a bit more time than that to spend together today. Thus, I am honored to introduce myself a little more thoroughly than the fleeting tick-tock of your modern timekeeping might otherwise allow. You may have wondered why I did not include any public offices in that list. I do not want to be remembered for having been representative to the Virginia House of Burgesses from the county of Albemarle, where I grew up, nor as a representative of Virginia to the Second Continental Congress and to the Congress of the United States under the Articles of Confederation. I do not want to be remembered as having represented the United States in France, nor as having served as the first Secretary of State under the U.S. Constitution. I do not want to be remembered as having served as the nation's second Vice President. Well, nobody wants to be remembered as having been Vice President. And I do not want to be remembered for having been the third President of the United States. In a government by the people, those who hold public offices are servants. If they serve well, they deserve to be remembered fondly for what they did, not for the title they did. I devoted roughly half of my 83 years from 1743 to 1826 to public service. On July 4th, 1776, after the vote on the Declaration of Independence, I was placed on a committee for, among other purposes, proposing a motto for the United States. The motto that Congress eventually adopted was E pluribus unum, which is Latin for out of many, one. I dedicated my life in public service to the idea that America will derive our greatness from the vast resources that can be found only in a diversity of opinion, and that we will derive our strength from our ability to focus that diversity into a unity of purpose. I articulated our purpose as one people in the Declaration of Independence. If I had but 10 seconds to tell you that purpose, I would say it this way. One day, all men, meaning all mankind, will be treated as they are created, as equals. Fortunately, I have decidedly more time than the instantaneous grammar or other forms of communication like the twittering of the birds in the trees in your day would otherwise permit. This allows me to continue telling the story of the Declaration of Independence, a story so aptly begun in this series of conversations by my compatriot, Richard Henry Lee. Mr. Lee told you of how, on Friday, June 7, 1776, he proposed the 3 resolutions that brought us one step closer to a declaration of our independence. First of the resolutions proposed independence. The second proposed the forming of foreign alliances. The third proposed that we create a plan of confederation between the colonies. On Saturday, June 8th, Congress proceeded to take the first resolution, that of independency, into consideration, and referred it to a committee of the whole, into which they immediately resolved themselves, and passed that day and Monday the 10th in debating on the subject. I took notes on these debates, which I saved as a record for posterity. The debate was not on whether we should become independent, but on when and how. It was argued by James Wilson, Robert R. Livingston, Edward Rutledge, John Dickinson, and others, that though they were friends to the measures themselves and saw the impossibility that we should ever again be united with Great Britain, yet they were against adopting them at this time. They said that we should wait for the voice of the people to drive us to it, which would happen soon enough. They essentially argued that we should first effect the second 2 resolutions by establishing alliances and organizing ourselves internally. Only then would we be ready to officially declare our independence. On the other side, it was argued by John Adams, Mr. Lee, George Wythe, and others that this was the best opportunity we would have, and that if we waited, we would miss our chance. The king had already made us independent by declaring us out of his protection, and no delegates could be denied a power of declaring an existing truth. They said that the people were waiting for us to lead the way. We had to take the risk of making the commitment publicly if we were to expect anyone, be they foreign powers or our own people, to join in the cause. It appearing in the course of these debates that the colonies of New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, South Carolina, and Maryland were not yet matured for falling from the parent stem, but that they were fast advancing to that state, it was thought most prudent to wait a while for them, and to postpone the final decision for 3 weeks. But that this might occasion as little delay as possible, a committee was appointed to prepare a Declaration of Independence. The committee were John Adams, Dr. Franklin, Roger Sherman, Robert R. Livingston, and myself. You may be wondering, if Robert R. Livingston of New York had been one of the leading spokesmen for not declaring independence so soon, why was he placed on the committee to draft the Declaration? The people of New York had not voted to support independence by June 11th, but we believed they soon would. Having Mr. Livingston on that committee would encourage them. Roger Sherman of Connecticut was universally respected in Congress as a man of moderation. He, like Livingston, did not participate actively in the drafting process. However, their presence on the committee helped to reassure the more tenuous delegates that this declaration would not be too radical to effect unity. Dr. Franklin was the most well-known and respected of the delegates in the eyes of European nations, whom we needed to enlist to our aid. He brought to the committee an international reputation as well as extended practical understanding of what the delicacy of foreign courts would require in a formal declaration. He was not eager to write the draft. "I have made it a rule," said he to me, "whenever in my power, to avoid becoming the draftsman of papers to be reviewed by a public body." John Adams had been one of the leaders of independency and the independency movement from the very beginning. Moreover, he represented Massachusetts, which had long suffered the worst infringements of rights by Parliament and the King. He was, however, busy with other committees. Among the reasons he gave that I should write the draft was the fact that I was a Virginian. This made sense. The majority of the conflicts having taken place in New England up until that point, part of our task was to convince the southern states that this was their struggle too. Of the southern states, Virginia was the most populous and had early become a leader in the movement to assert our equal rights. He also acknowledged that while his vehemence and forthrightness of expression had caused some in Congress to look at him with a jaundiced eye, my own habitual silence during debates, when I made it a practice to take careful notes, meant that the draft coming from my pen would earn it no enemies a priori. Delegates would be more likely to consider the words on their own account. It may seem strange to you that all of the committee members were not vying for the honor of writing such an important document. In June of 1776, none of us realized how important the Declaration of Independence would eventually become. Oh, we knew that what we were doing overall was important, but we thought that the June 7th resolution for independency would be the most memorable document. Between the 11th and the 28th, I primarily worked alone. I did most of the work in one of the 2 rooms that I had rented on the southwest corner of High Street, which you may know better as Market Street, and 7th, from one Mr. Jacob Graff. This location was, at the time, situated toward the outskirts of Philadelphia. At that location, I enjoyed the benefits of freely circulating air and more peace and quiet than a more centrally situated living quarters would allow. I wrote a number of drafts, of which I preserved a portion. Dr. Franklin and Mr. Adams made a few alterations during this process. For instance, my original draft read, "Hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." Suggestion of the committee, that was changed to the much more scientific expression, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." I knew it was my duty not to find out new principles or new arguments never before thought of, nor merely to say things which had never been said before, but to place before mankind the common sense of the subject in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent. and to justify ourselves in the independent stand we were compelled to take. Neither aiming at originality of principle or sentiment, nor yet copied from any particular and previous writing, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and to give to that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. It therefore should come as no surprise that I found expressions that harmonized with sentiments expressed elsewhere in the colonies. For instance, the Virginia Bill of Rights, which was adopted by the convention at Williamsburg on the day after our committee had been formed in Philadelphia to write the Declaration, read in part that all men are by nature equally free and independent. They have certain inherent rights, of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. After changes by the committee as well as by Congress, the Declaration as approved by the Continental Congress read that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This brings me to the changes made by Congress. After the committee approved the draft, I reported it to the House on Friday, the 28th of June, when it was read and ordered to lie on the table. Richard Henry Lee kept a tally of the July 2nd vote on the same page where he had written the independency resolution. John Adams will tell you the story of the debates and the vote, so I will move my story forward to the afternoon of the 2nd. After the vote on independence, Congress proceeded the same day to consider the Declaration, the announcement of independence. This is when they began to make their changes. The pusillanimous idea that we had friends in England worth keeping terms with still haunted the minds of many. For this reason, those passages which conveyed censures on the people of England were struck out, lest they should give them offense. Congress made many more changes than that, 86 in all, including the shortening of the document by a quarter. On the afternoon of the 4th, it was read aloud for final review and approved. Congress then ordered the Declaration of Independence printed. That part of the story, however, will be told by John Dunlap, the man who printed the document. I was asked to introduce myself and to tell a part of the story of the Declaration of Independence. Having fulfilled those duties, I see that I have a little time left to respond to some questions that have been sent to me. This question is from one ▼ from ▼ Pennsylvania. Pretoria writes, "You wrote all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence, yet you owned slaves. Did you attempt to address the issue of slavery while you were writing the Declaration of Independence?" Yes, Pretoria. My original draft of the Declaration of Independence included a paragraph condemning the institution of slavery. The paragraph was included in the list of grievances and read thus: "He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither." This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian King of Great Britain. Determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold, he has prostituted his negative for the suppressing of every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce. That this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished dye, He is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us, and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, by murdering the people upon whom he also obtruded them, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people, with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another. This paragraph was only implicitly the condemnation of slavery. The purpose of the paragraph was to accuse King George III of committing crimes not only against our rights as British subjects, but against human nature itself. But no matter where I would have included the subject of slavery in the document, I would have needed to express it within the context of a condemnation of the King and of Parliament, because that was the nature of the document I was writing. Congress decided that the subject did not serve as an effective grievance, at least partially because the paragraph seemed to place the blame of slavery entirely on the shoulders of the King. When I was writing the Declaration of Independence, I was serving as counsel for the United States of America in the court of the world, prosecuting King George III and Parliament for crimes under natural law. Of course, I did not include any mention of the fault of the colonies in the matter of slavery, any more than I would have mentioned our own blame in any other subject in my argument. If you ever have the misfortune of needing to retain the assistance of legal counsel, and your attorney begins making arguments for the other side of the case, you may wish to consider seeking new counsel. Perhaps the logic of the paragraph was unwieldy. But if the structure of the grievance was the only issue, Congress could have made alterations to the paragraph, as they made changes elsewhere. Instead, they removed the entire subject of slavery from the document. I maintained ever afterward that their real reason for striking out the clause reprobating the enslaving the inhabitants of Africa was something other than any perceived inefficacy of the writing style or logic. I argue that it was removed in complaisance to South Carolina and Georgia, who had never attempted to restrain the importation of slaves, and who, on the contrary, still wished to continue it. Our northern brethren also, I believe, felt a little tender under those censures, for though their people had very few slaves themselves, yet they had been pretty considerable carriers of slaves to others. What they did was to silence the discussion about the problem within the context of this statement of the underlying reasons for our revolution. I will understand that this is a difficult subject to talk about, but we cannot find a solution for problems we refuse to discuss. Now, see here. This question was sent to me by one ᖴᖇᘿᘿᘍᑍ in Mableknot, Georgia. ᖴᖇᘿᘿᘍᑍ writes, "How did you feel while Congress was debating and editing the committee's final draft of the Declaration of Independence?" Well, ᖴᖇᘿᘿᘍᑍ, I admit to you that I was not happy about the edits made by Congress. I was sitting by Dr. Franklin at the time, who perceived that I was not insensible to these mutilations. He then told me the following story. "When I was a journeyman printer," said he, "one of my companions, an apprentice hatter, having served out his time, was about to open shop for himself. His first concern was to have a handsome signboard with a proper inscription. He composed it in these words: 'John Thompson, hatter, makes and sells hats for ready money,' with a figure of a hat subjoined. But he thought he would submit it to his friends for their amendments. The first he showed it to thought the word hatter tautologous, because followed by the words makes hats, which shows he was a hatter, it was struck out. The next observed that the word makes might as well be omitted, because his customers would not care who made the hats, if good, and to their mind, they would buy by whomever made. He struck it out. A third said he thought the words for ready money were useless, as it was not the custom of the place to sell on credit. Everyone who purchased expected to pay. They were parted with, and the inscription now stood, 'John Thompson sells hats.' Sells hats, said his next friend. Why, nobody will expect you to give them away. What then is the use of that word? It was stricken out, and hats followed it, the rather as there was one painted on the board. So, the inscription was reduced ultimately to John Thompson, with the figure of a hat subjoined. I suppose that the good Dr. Franklin was trying to salve my wounded pride while gently reminding me to take myself a little less seriously. Anyone who has ever written anything to be reviewed by a committee is probably able to relate to the good Mr. Thompson hatter. If so, they can understand how I felt as the Continental Congress wreaked their depredations upon my work. In spite of my personal feelings, however, I remained silent during the process, because I knew that we needed to use compromise in order to achieve consensus if we were going to overcome this crisis. This question comes all the way from the town of Couchant Pinnacles, California, sent to me by one ▼▼⅟ Gammon writes, you mentioned that at the time you were writing the Declaration of Independence, you didn't know how important it was going to become. How did your opinion of what the document means change during your life? What do you hope it will mean to future generations of Americans? Well, Gammon, the Declaration and the 4th of July began to enjoy public fame as early as 1777, with Americans celebrating the day and the document. As both the day and the document were elevated in the popular mind over the years, I became associated with them. This association played a significant role in my being considered by the American people as a representative of what our revolution and our nation stood for. By the time the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence was approaching, I thought of it in the following terms. May it be to the world what I believe it will be, to some parts sooner, to others later, but finally to all, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains under which monkish ignorance and superstition had persuaded them to bind themselves, and to assume the blessings and security of self-government. That form which we have substituted restores the free right to the unbounded exercise of reason and freedom of opinion. All eyes are opened, or opening, to the rights of man. The general spread of the light of science has already laid open to every view the palpable truth that the mass of mankind has not been born with saddles on their backs, nor a favored few booted and spurred, ready to ride them legitimately by the grace of God. These are grounds of hope for others. For ourselves, let the annual return of this day forever refresh our recollections of these rights and an undiminished devotion to them.
Now, Zach, that's a heck of a video. That is a heck of a video, my friend. But I'm going to ask this. Do you think maybe next week, because I was looking at the other ones that they have on this, maybe we need to do John Dunlap and let him talk about printing the actual declaration. I'm thinking maybe next week we can have that on, because that would be an interesting video to actually watch. Because Thomas Jefferson and the Committee of Five. Hey, Zach, I got a question for you for the chat. Maybe someone in the chat will know. Do you know who was the last member of the people that actually drew up the Constitution? Do you know who the last person was? And anyone in chat, do you know who was the last person of the Committee of Five? No idea. Well, the man we just listened to was the last one because he was the youngest one. The man that wrote most of the Declaration of Independence was the actual last man to actually be on the Committee of Five. It was Thomas Jefferson. Just a little. Oh, for crying out loud, ghetto. But this is why I love teaching about this. I give a little things that most people will never actually know. But like the video said, Thomas Jefferson does not want to be remembered as a president, does not want to be remembered as a vice president. His greatest attribute to the United States was the writing of the Declaration of Independence. And that's something. Night, Tom. And thank you for coming by, my friend. But yeah, Tom, that's the thing about it. I'm trying to get people where they know about these documents. This is why a lot of this is happening, because people don't know the documents.
I love you, brother Tom. You're in my prayers.
But yeah. Do you think anyone should we take some questions about this document? Oh, for crying out loud. Ghetto's getting himself into trouble.
Maybe if the chat wants to.
All right. Does anyone in chat have any questions they like for me or Zach to answer about the Declaration? Do 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 do. What was the Powhatan Confederacy in? That one I actually do not know. That one I do not know. That one I will have to look. Sita, I will look into that and get back to you.
We are Americans.
The Organic Act actually makes DC the actual United States. Washington, D.C., when it was first enacted, but I've also seen articles, because I have been looking a little bit when we was watching the videos, that 3 years after the Organic Act of that, it was repealed by Congress. So I'm gonna have to go into a bigger dive into that, but and bring Ghetto's comment up, if you would, please. What? And I don't know what the founders were thinking. I think the reason they put that in there was they was trying to get rid of it, but they knew they couldn't do that and have a couple of southern states help them fight the British. So I think the reason that was put in there was to get rid of slavery, but I do, because that's what I've read, different things, but I can, Ghetto, believe me, I understand where you're coming from with that. But that's what I've read upon, and I'm going to go deeper into that, but that's why they had them words in there that all men are created equal. That's why it was in there. They were trying to get rid of slavery. But yes, Ghetto, I appreciate that comment. It is a bit hypocritical. It is a bit hypocritical, but that's why we're trying to teach about this stuff. We're trying to show you that they wanted to get rid of it, but there was a lot of things going on at the time too. And stand up, you're right. We are living in a similar time. That's just my opinion. According to our Constitution, if they come here, I'm not going to try to be a little PC because we are on YouTube. I'm going to try to be somewhat PC with this. Those people crossing that border, according to the Constitution, probably not, because they're not under the Constitution like we are. But as human beings, yes, they are created equal. As a Christian, as a believer in Christ, yes, I say they are equal, but that's a whole nother story. All right. Thank you, Ghetto. Tell me if that's better. But yeah, that's the thing about it. We are, as an old history teacher once told me, we're standing on the shoulders of giants in this country. I do that from time to time, Texan. I don't mean to, but yeah. Because I know my voice carries sometimes and I get a little excited. I don't mean to, but it does happen.
Well, we want all people here, but I prefer they come legally because that way businesses aren't paying under the table.
Zach, that's very true. That is very true. Chrissy Cat, I know that. If you notice, I do not get mad at you guys when you tell me I get a little too loud. Because some of you probably have earbuds in and are listening to this when you're driving and stuff like that. I don't mean to do it. I do get excited with what I'm talking about with this stuff because I want people to know it. I am a very passionate about this subject, as Mr. Zach knows. But yes, I do not take any offense to it. It just... Yeah. Navy vet has a point there. But any other questions? Mr. Smouse, do you have any questions for me? Nope. Oh, that, Ghetto, all I'm going to say... And Zach, I won't play the soundbite that I want to play, but all I gotta say is FJB. FJB. I'm gonna do a deeper dive into this, Chrissy Cat. I have found articles saying that they repealed it about 3 years later. And this is one of the articles that I've actually seen, Chrissy Cat. So I'm going to do a deeper dive. But yeah, if you want to read that, that is actually. But yeah, they have said that the Act of 1871 was repealed. But that's. And see, the Powhatan tribe was actually not too far from where I grew up.
We are Americans.
But yeah, we will. I'm gonna do a deeper dive into the Act of 1870, the Organic Act of 1871, and see what the actual truth is with that, and I will get back to everybody with that. Like I said, Chrissy Cat, I am gonna do some digging. Now that's a heck of a question. Zach, you want to answer that one? Because I know Tuesday we're doing a stream about that one, about yours. You can go first with that one. Because we can plug Tuesday's stream and get some people over on my channel. And Ghetto, you're right about that. So, Zach, who's your favorite president from the past? Hey, Redneck Prepper.
My favorite president was Ronald Reagan.
And Zach, what are we doing Tuesday on my channel?
We are going to cover Ronald Reagan.
And I put my channel in the description down in the chat. And I am going to say this now. Zach, I have something on Odyssey starting tomorrow night. Mr. Zachary Smiles and the Fight for Patriotism will be on Odyssey because of I will let him use my account. I've set it up. I will give him all the information. And so if you have an Odyssey account, you will be able to watch Zach over there because he will be live starting tomorrow night. Because I did make the channel. And at some point, what we will do, we will get you Jessa, we start at 11:30 Eastern. But yes. And thank you to everyone that subscribed to my channel, because I will have Zach on there from time to time because he is my patriot brother, and I want people to know what kind of what he teaches over here. So And there is, well, I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. I enjoy helping my brother Zach, Chrissy, because he's been good to me. And here is Zach's Odyssey channel. That will be Zach, you got anything else for our great patriots down in the chat?
Well, hey family, thank you for coming and learning more about the Constitution. I appreciate and love every single one of you. The Bible verse for Thursday, June 2nd, 2022 is, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." Luke 6:36 NIV.
Thank you, buddy. Thunder, I think our whole way of life here in the United States is being threatened by the changes of this administration. My thoughts. That's just my thoughts.
Any final words, Angry?
I just want to say people know what these documents actually say, because they are an important puzzle piece into getting our government back to us and not us being ordered by our government. So please learn these documents. And if you go to angryconservative.net/PDF, you can have all the documents that we talk about on these streams right there. And thank you, Lisa, for putting that in the chat for me.
We need you now. We need you now. One day, one day, one day, I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on because of you. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone.
Good night, everybody.